Broadway. But I'm not going to. In fact, I know how to do all of these, but I'm not going to. I'm actually not going to. I'm actually going to take us over to the dark side for a little while, because there's much talk about privatizing UC, and I want to talk a little bit about what's at stake in that possible future. The future we're very, very seriously threatened with. The future, indeed, that is partly already upon us, but would, if allowed to unfold, unmitigated, unstopped, unprotested, would be a very, very serious alteration in what we are, what we do, what this institution is. Privatization means many things. It obviously involves replacing public funding with student fees, growing corporate sponsorship of academic research, increased reliance on endowments, involvement with the stock and bond markets. But at its most basic, it signals a transformation from an institution that is publicly supported and serves a public purpose to one that is organized to sell products to consumers, whether those are students purchasing an education, as Rob Resch just spoke about, or investors purchasing research results. It entails converting an institution that is based on principles of a common good, equality, inclusion, self-governance, and the ineffability of certain kinds of human development and knowledge, converting such an institution to one that is increasingly bound to entrepreneurship, capital appreciation, and is governed by organizational principles of hierarchy, inequality, and immediate commodifiability and applicability of its endeavors. And what I want to do now is just point to a few of the mechanisms and identify a few of the crucial effects of this kind of shift. As you have heard, privatizing public entities and market societies is not new, but we're at a watershed point in its acceleration and in its widespread embrace. For decades, Californians enthusiastically supported public education and other public goods. This changed fundamentally during the Reagan governorship years, 1967 to 75, the years germinating the so-called taxpayer revolts that would eventually catapult Reagan to the presidency. Now, importantly, what was then called Reaganomics, what we now call neoliberalism, of which privatization is a dimension, consists not just in economic deregulation, tax cuts, and so forth. It consists fundamentally in disseminating market values to every sphere of human activity. Within neoliberalism, market principles literally depart the market sphere to organize and govern every domain of human existence. And that means that neoliberalism in particular, privatization especially, involves a forthright assault on the very idea of public goods and values. As Margaret Thatcher, one of the world's most ardent neoliberals, and neoliberals famously once remarked, there is no such thing as society. There are individual men and women. That could be the motto of what we're talking about here. Now you can see this process in a nutshell in Prop 13. 1978 legislation that you've heard about from every single one of us, the legislation that capped the Reagan gubernatorial years. I want to add something to Kevin's history, because conventionally, Prop 13 is described as a populist tax revolt. What's important to remember about Prop 13 is that it was actually a response to court-mandated equality in school funding. That is, it was a retort to California Supreme Court decisions that required redistributing property tax revenue to fund schools in rich and poor neighborhoods at the same level. That would have been a great idea, but what Prop 13 did was make sure there was no revenue to distribute. So Prop 13 was quite literally a rebellion against equality in the name of all those old people who were being pushed out of their houses because of inflated housing prices, but in fact that was not the reality. It was a rebellion against equality. It was a rebellion against the very value of quality public education for all. It was a rebellion against democracy. The minority rule that it wrote into law was a dramatic subversion of popular sovereignty and a subversion with the market principle that you get to keep what you've earned and no democracy can tell you otherwise. Prop 13 in this regard is a crude microcosm of what was to come. The steady erosion of the very idea of public goods, the erosion of the value of progressive taxation to support them, the erosion of equality as a value in education, and the erosion of democratic principles of governance and shared power, all of which are now fighting for what remains of their lives. Now, at this juncture, we cannot say a simple yes or no to privatization. The beast is already inside the house. What we can do is make the strongest possible case for renewed public support to strive to keep the beast small, contained, maybe even tamed. What I want to do in what remains of the time is list 10 things that privatization generates as it brings market principles into the very heart of the university. Each of these is already present in the university, but each of these dire consequences would be extended by the intense and rapid privatization with which we are now threatened. So, privatization entails first, something we've all talked about, decreased commitment to educating California's best students, a shift from meritocracy to plutocracy, a turn away from equal opportunity. As the rush toward out-of-state admissions for revenue purposes makes clear, student access will be, with privatization, increasingly driven by purchase power rather than by who belongs here or whom a public institution is meant to serve, let alone by the commitment to generating social equality through education that several of the previous speakers have talked about. So that's what privatization means first. Second, it means increasing inequality in every strand and strata of the university and a diminished sense of shared purpose within the university. Concretely, this takes the form of huge and unprecedented salary differentials across faculty within and between departments. It means huge and unprecedented differentials in departmental resources, in graduate student funding packages, and in the costs of undergraduate majors and degrees. It also means the departure from the principle that the diverse teaching and research needs and the diverse revenue generating capacities of the university as a whole that necessarily carry each other, that principle will be departed from. Some research and teaching requires expensive labs or field work, others require only a great library. Some research has ready external grant support, others doesn't. Some subjects can be taught only in small venues like languages, others can be taught in grand lecture halls. It's only when the whole university has a shared purpose that these differences can be balanced and accommodated. And it's that shared purpose that is absolutely undone by the dissemination of entrepreneurial principles across the university. Third, privatization means decreased support for all elements of the university that are not, as you don't put it, entrepreneurial.